Mr. Charles Bain Smith, is that right?
Charles Bain Smith.
Oh, Charles,
yes.
sorry, I can't see because I've scored it out. I do apologise. Anyway, you've got 3 minutes. Do carry on.
Okay.
Thank you.
My natural reaction to the officer's report would be, if I'd read it, here is a historic site in Margate that some nasty developer wants to totally demolish and fill with an ugly building. That's what this report wants you to believe. If you've read my historic appraisal report, you'll see that the site of Thanet Press was not a printing works until after 1936. English Heritage says the same. The site was originally a large mansion house with 2 stable muses to the west. Kelly's directory first records Thanet Press occupying these buildings in 1948, and yet the Victorian Societies concludes that because Thanet Press was founded in 1770 on a completely different site, these buildings are highly important monuments. These buildings are interesting, but see for yourself. The complex is really a large post-war concrete structure with fragments of earlier buildings and a nice facade along Union Crescent. That's the reality. The officer's report quotes paragraph 133 of the NPPF, which states that you may propose development with substantial loss or harm to an historic asset if there is either substantial public benefit or all of the following points apply. 1, the asset can't reasonably be reused. 2, no viable use for the asset can be found. 3, no grant funding can be found. 4, the harm is outweighed by the benefit of bringing the site back into use. Well, all 4 of those are met, and the applicant has provided a great deal of evidence for all the above. But then we also have a major public benefit which has been brushed under the carpet. You have a lack of affordable housing in the district. Redressing this must be in the public interest. But apparently this would discourage, and I quote, economically active people from the town. Well, most of us have lived in some form of affordable housing at some stage. We weren't all born with the keys to a detached home, and yet we don't all stay in affordable housing. This is really what the protests are all about, why a blog site was set up by a leading member of one of those amenity societies to coordinate attacks on any realistic form of development, apart from the gentrifying of the centre of Margate. It's a great, loud campaign, but there is a wider public that don't have the opportunity to voice their needs. Then there is the inaccurate recording of dimensions. The proposed 22-bay Union Crescent facade is actually shorter than the existing and taller facade of 30 opposite by at least a house, so very little difference. And why is something excellent one side of the street claimed to be farcical on the other? It isn't. You allowed a very similar scheme in Dorby Square, which involved the demolition of a derelict Victorian hotel. You are rightly proud of the results and the benefits it brought to the area. The case officer knows that in respect to reasons 6 to 10 for refusal, she has agreed within the last 2 weeks to proceed with a Section 106 agreement post-planning committee. This was after 5 months of failing to address the applicant's correspondence. Standen is not a nasty developer. They have just been appointed to provide the first 15,000 homes across the UK for members of the armed forces community, part of an initiative to provide 200,000 homes, 15 care homes, 6 rehabilitation centres and a head injury unit, and part of this provision is destined for Thanet. You need to work with them. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And now we come to the second speaker, Mr. Dan Thompson, on behalf of the Hawley Square Residents Association. Thank you very much. You've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Committee. My name's Dan Thompson. I'm a Union Crescent resident, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Hawley Square Residents Association. We're urging members to refuse this application for all the reasons given in the report. We'd like to draw attention to 4 particular points. The first is density. Margate Central is already densely populated and is one of the most deprived areas in the UK with a high concentration of small flats. Existing houses in Union Crescent are split into as many as 6 flats already. These small flats attract a transient population which causes problems which the Council's Planning Department, Margate Task Force and my ward councillor have all been made aware of consistently. The housing strategy says we have too many small flats and not enough family houses, and that was really highlighted when I moved here and really struggled to find a family home in Margate. This scheme proposes 64 1- and 2-bed flats. Instead of addressing a need, this development would make a problem and a difficult situation worse. Councillor Hayden wisely spoke about cramming earlier. This is cramming on a huge scale. The second point is with regards to highways. These additional flats come with 1 parking space, and that will be harmful to the amenity of all the neighbours and is against planning policy D1. The strain on street parking and pedestrian movement highlighted in the officer's report is increased in Union Crescent by large numbers driving in from elsewhere using the mosque, churches and Theatre Royal already. And this is in a road busy with buses and delivery lorries. We're particularly concerned about the comments from the highways officer about the crossing at the top of Pump Lane and the concerns about crossing for those with impaired mobility. The third is the point that's been addressed earlier of heritage. Well, actually, Union Crescent is a conservation area. It's lined with a variety of fine buildings, many Grade 2 listed. The collection of industrial buildings that form Thanet Press are unique. They tell not just the story of Thanet Press itself, but the earlier history of that industry within Margate. There's an earlier printing works there as well. And Thanet Press printed everything from Bibles to royal wedding invitations and exam papers. These buildings should be protected or enhanced. Wiping out this history would be harmful. The massive block of flats proposed would be overbearing, harmful to Union Crescent, its listed neighbours, and to Princes Street as well. Demolition and redevelopment is only permitted if it would enhance the conservation area. This does not enhance the conservation area and should be refused. The existing buildings can be adapted and reused, their heritage celebrated. Other developers manage to do this around the country. The Vinyl Factory in London, Butler's Wharf on the Thames, Circus Street Market in Brighton are all premium developments because of their history. There's no evidence of any attempt to preserve these buildings, and people like me who've approached the agents locally have never had a reply or have been told the site is unavailable. The fourth point is the last point I'd like to address, and that's employment. Thanet Press, as a site we know, employed 300 people. While the economy has changed, there's still a huge need for employment in the area, which has above average unemployment. At the same time, businesses like mine that I've moved here to Margate are unable to find suitable premises, and creative studios and co-working spaces across the town, of which there are a remarkably high number for a small town, are all at capacity. No other site in Margate lends itself so well to a mixed ecology of studios, offices, spaces for small-scale manufacture, live-work units, all with an excellent street-facing facade, just a minute from the old town, which is also at full capacity. And that would be in line with both local and national policies in these areas. Thanet Press, as it is now, neglected, boarded up, used for fly tipping, is a real problem. It hasn't been looked after by the current owners. But opened up by good development, it could be the biggest opportunity Margate has to embed the emerging creative economy in the centre of the town. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now come to the third speaker raising points of concern, and that is the representative of Margate Area Advisory Group, and he is in fact the secretary, and that's Mr. Liam Nab. Are you there, Mr. Nab? Thank you. Do carry on, because you've got 3 minutes.
Dear Chair and members of the Planning Committee, my name is Liam Nab and I'm speaking on behalf of the CAG, the Margate Conservation Advisory Group. The Margate CAG supports the views of the officer's report and its recommendations. The CAG is in agreement with the Margate Civic Society, the Victorian Society, English Heritage, the 2 conservation officers and TDC's Heritage Advisor. The site is in a conservation area and it is surrounded by Grade 2 listed buildings. The Union Crescent frontage of Thanet Press is formed of a series of interesting buildings of architectural merit that as a group positively contributes to the streetscape. Conservation is not about creating uniformity, it's about preserving historic fabric and protecting local character and distinctiveness. Thanet Press was founded in 1770 in Margate and is one of Margate's oldest and most distinguished companies. The demolition will be significantly harmful to the conservation area. The proposal to replace these buildings with a massive, poorly designed, overcrowded, pastiche block of flats will be harmful to the setting of listed buildings and the views of the conservation area. Princes Street will be overshadowed by the out-of-scale building. The new building will be visible from Holy Square and overlook the rear windows from only 6 metres. The site is grossly overdeveloped, 64 1-bed and 2-bedroom flats and no family dwellings. This is the slum of the future. This is not sustainable housing and contravenes TDC's housing policy. The proposal is much poorer materials and design than the buildings it would replace. The proposal does not preserve or enhance the conservation area and is therefore contrary to local and national policy. The applicant has an obligation to look at the adaptation of the existing buildings for reuse. They say it is not viable, but have failed to provide evidence of this. This is contrary to many expert opinions, including that of English Heritage. The building can easily be adapted, converted and reused. The use for small businesses has not been considered, and it is small businesses that are moving to Margate and driving the regeneration. This is a valuable site for the creation of employment and regeneration. So the reuse and adaptation for the creation of employment is what the CAG would recommend. We hope you would refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now come to the final speaker, and that's Ward Councillor, Councillor Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, Committee, for allowing me to speak. It was in about July of last year that this matter first came to my attention by a nearby resident who was very concerned about the possibility of overlooking her property. So I met with officers on numerous occasions at the beginning of this stage. I met with Councillor John Watkins, with the applicants, and we were in a pretty desperate state for something to be done with this building, because we were constantly getting problems of, as you've said, fly tipping, people breaking into the site. We were at the first impressed to see that someone was interested in developing the site. We have monitored throughout the time. There is obviously very valid reasons from all sides about why this really needs you to come on a site visit. I feel we need to sort this site out once and for all. It is a matter of opinion what should be there. I personally, as the ward councillor, am aware of some intimidating comments have been made about myself for even calling this to committee, and I shall tell everybody here, as long as I am the ward councillor, I will not be intimidated into not calling items where I believe they should be called, and thank you for allowing me to do so. I think I called this probably in September of last year, was the first time I put forward that I wished to speak. So rather than say any more about the situation behind this, in fairness to the applicant, in fairness to the objectors, in fairness to everybody who's contributed, I would like you to have a site visit. From my own point of view, the issues in the ward are about sewerage systems, about highway problems, but also it's about the need for accommodation. I am the Veterans Champion. I'm signed up to the Covenant, the Army Covenant, and I only heard in the last few days about this interest for supporting what now we could call Homes for Heroes. If that's what's intended here, I certainly want you to give it some attention. I do think the number of flats is probably too many. However, I would like you to have a site visit, and that's as far as I would like to go on this one. Thank you.
I'll now actually ask the planning officer to outline the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the application site here. This is Union Crescent running along here, and this is Princes Street running along here. It's on the edge of Margate Town Centre, and as you can see, the council offices are here, so it's quite close to where we are. This is a plan that was submitted as part of the application, but it's quite a useful plan showing the number of buildings on the site. There's quite a number of different structures. There's along the buildings at front Union Crescent are more traditional in their design, more historic. There's a single building here, and then another building of a different design here, and then another building along here. So they look like three different buildings as they front the street. And as you can see, they come around the corner here onto the former Pump Lane. To the rear of the site onto Princes Street, the buildings are much newer than 1950s. And here is a view from Hawley Square. So you can see here are the buildings here. So this is one block here, and another block behind it. You can see the row of listed buildings adjacent to it, and this is the row of listed buildings opposite the site. This is a more detailed picture of one of the buildings. So again, you can see it's rounded on the corner onto Pump Lane here. And this is the other building. So there's a building central building here, and then another wider building here that's a raised floor area. So it has different proportions to other buildings within the street, and it looks much more industrial. And this is the view taken down Union Crescent. So again, you can see the listed buildings here adjacent to the site, and again the listed buildings on the opposite side. And again, another shot of there, showing the varied character towards this end of the street as you approach the Margate town centre. This is the view from Princes Street. So this is the newer blocks, which are 1950s, 2-storey in height. And again, this is looking back from the other end of Princes Street. So you can see these are the neighbouring listed buildings here, and this is the 1950s block onto the pavement. And again, this is taken from the far end of Princes Street, looking back towards Hawley Square. So again, this is the block on the right here, and this shows the varied character in this street, with mainly the backs of properties actually onto Hawley Square. So some of them front onto the pavement, some of them set back. This shows the neighbouring listed buildings, so it shows the current relationship between the existing buildings on the site and the neighbouring listed buildings. And this view again is taken from Hawley Square, looking back into Princes Street. It shows the narrow width of the road and the narrow width of the pathways. And this is an aerial shot of the site. So the main concern is to do with the demolition of the existing buildings. As part of the submission, the applicant has submitted a structural survey which confirms that the walls and floors of the buildings are in reasonable good condition. They've also done some marketing to see whether the existing buildings could be accommodated by a commercial use, but there's been no single business that would be interested in the site, given sort of the relationship of the buildings. But there does seem to be some interest from smaller start-up businesses, mainly from the creative industries, who are looking for affordable, mainly rented space, but this doesn't seem to be a viable option from the applicant's point of view. They're looking to demolish all of the buildings on the site other than the buildings in this corner here onto Union Crescent, which have now been removed from the application. No clear justification for the removal of the buildings has been submitted, as far as I'm concerned. There's no justification for why the buildings can't be converted, and no viability assessment has been submitted to look at why the buildings can't be converted. There's been
Could you just clearly show where the Union Crescent building is?
So this is Union Crescent here. So we've got the main block here, and then that's the other block that goes on to Pump Lane. So that's a part of Pump Lane there, and there's Princes Street with the block there.
There are the more modern one that's in Princes Street.
That's a modern block there, so it runs all the way along that width of the road. So 34 neighbour letters of objections have been received to the demolition of the buildings. As well as that, we've received objections from English Heritage, the Victorian Society, Margate Conservation Area Advisory Group, and there's also been objections from the Council's Conservation Officer and Heritage Advisor. The main concern with the loss of the buildings is that we feel that the buildings make a positive contribution to the significance of the conservation area due to their industrial character, which we feel both enhances the street scene and reinforces local distinctiveness within the street. It also aids in illustrating the way in which Margate grew and the industrial buildings that would have been present within the town centre. They add an attractive variety to the pattern of the street development, roofline and materials, and we believe they have some interesting and prominent features which have a positive contribution to the architectural interest and townscape quality of the area. So for these reasons, we feel that the loss of the buildings would be damaging to the conservation area and to the setting of the neighbouring and adjacent listing buildings. The application is for the erection of 64 self-contained units. So this is the site plan showing the proposed application. There's two blocks, so this is block 1 here, with part of the block fronting Union Crescent and part of the block fronting Princes Street, and this is block 2 here, which fronts onto Princes Street. This is the elevation of the proposed development. So again, it shows the listed buildings here. It shows the increase in height of the proposed development, which is 4 stories in height. It shows the width of the development, and it has quite a uniform pattern, which is tried to mimic the design of the existing listed buildings within the street. There is concern with this though, that the height and bulk of this proposed development would over-dominate the street. It would lack variety and try and compete with the existing listed buildings. It does front onto pump lanes, so it does allow for some historical vistas but back to Princes Street, which is how it would have been. So that is a benefit of the scheme, but otherwise the scheme is considered to be detrimental to the conservation area and to the setting of the listed buildings as a result of the design. This is the side elevation of the block, and this shows the floor plan. So it's for 64 1 and 2 bed units. At the moment, all of them are proposed for affordable housing, and this shows the upper levels of the units. This is block 2, so the one that fronts onto Princes Street. So again, it's a 4-storey building, a similar design to the listed buildings in the other road, with a uniform appearance. And this again is the footprint of it. So there is some concern with the impact on the neighbouring properties due to the 4-storey nature of the buildings. Especially in Princes Street, which is currently 2-storey, there's concerns with windows which are looking into neighbouring properties, and also the overbearing nature of it, which is quite close to the rear gardens of neighbouring properties and to the listed buildings adjacent to it. Going back, as part of the scheme, some amenity space has been provided on the site, as you can see here, but due to the number of units, we would also require some contribution for off-site play provisions, which the applicant has agreed to, although no 106 has been submitted as yet. The housing officer is concerned with the number of units, given that they're all 1 and 2 beds. They don't really address the Thanet's need for family housing, and they're concerned with the concentration of the number of units in this location, also concerned about how the management of the properties would work, given that we don't have any information on who would be managing them. So, but we do only require 30% affordable housing, but they are proposing the 100%, which they are using to justify as a reason, for a public benefit reason. But given the size of the units and the concentration, the fact that the housing officer is quite concerned with that number in this location, we don't feel that the social benefit of 100% affordable housing in this location could outweigh the other concerns. Highways have raised concerns to the scheme on the fact that there's a narrow pavement on this side and also a narrow pavement on this side with lack of pedestrian crossing facilities. And given the high concentration of units in this location, there's likely to be a need for people to cross the road towards the shops on this side of the road. So they're concerned with the fact that there's inadequate pedestrian crossing facilities and pedestrian infrastructure in place to serve the development. And there's also concern with the impact on neighbouring community with the number of vehicles that may be required to park in the area. Contributions have been requested by KCC, and